Hey everyone, I'm Chris, and welcome to another video in the Modular Firearm series for NeoFPS. In this video, we're going to be looking at the Modular Firearm wizard and creating a new firearm prefab using that. So the very first thing that we're going to need to do is actually open up the wizard. So when you first installed NeoFPS, you should have seen the NeoFPS Hub pop up. But if you've since closed that, you can find it in Tools, NeoFPS, NeoFPS Hub. So this is a super useful little tool. It's got all kinds of things in there, from different links to the documentation, the Discord, email, to quick starts to guide you through getting started with various different features in NeoFPS, such as the weapon overheat here. But right here, down at the bottom, we've got a section called Wizards. So this is a selection of tools just to aid in speeding up and simplifying creating different objects for NeoFPS. The second one down is Modular Firearm. So the wizards work by providing you with multiple sets of choices for the different elements that you want to add to your weapon. You can start from a template. Here we've got these three different ones to start with: Advanced Assault Rifle, Anti-Materiel, Sniper Rifle, and Basic Assault Rifle, with a little description of each one down here. We'll have a look at some of the templates when we're done setting up our own. But the other thing you can do is you can create from scratch. So if you click this, it takes you to the first page of the questionnaire. But before we do that, let's have a look at the actual assets that we're going to use to demonstrate this. So first up, the weapon that I'm going to be using is the new FPS Weapon 02, which is an FN Scar L by McAlpine Ventures. So it's quite a nice model, decent textures. Also comes with animations, which is very important and actually quite hard to find, to be honest. Yeah, it's pretty decent. So I recommend giving that one a look. The other thing we're going to be using is knives, muzzle flashes, and impacts, which is quite a popular one for decent impact effects, but also these muzzle flashes and shell casing particle systems. So yeah, let's take a look at getting those set up in Unity. Okay, so here I've got the Scar L prefab open. I imported the asset and then moved it into this third-party folder to group it with some of the others. So within here is a single prefab called Scar L. Now when I first opened this, it had a few missing materials and things like that, which I've contacted the dev about. They've been super responsive, so I think that's going to get fixed pretty quickly. So I won't cover any of that, but essentially it was just finding the correct materials for the arms or the different parts. What I've also done is gone through and disabled a few objects like the suppressor and the foregrip, which we're not really going to look at in this tutorial. It just complicates things. And that's about it, really. So this is ready to use just as is, with those things disabled. Also looking at the Scar L, the other thing that I've done is take the Animator controller, which was found in this animations folder called Scar L Proto. Now, the one that's set up here is quite a complicated little beast, mainly because they have separate foregrip animations. They've got foregrip removed, foregrip toggled, so closed, foregrip open. And if we open up each of these, you'll find various different animations based on the different foregrip states. Now, to keep this this tutorial simple, what I've done is I've duplicated this animator, and I've pulled out the animations from the foregrip removed section. So we've got fire, draw, hide, and reload chambered, reload empty. So two reload animations, one for if you've used all of the bullets in the gun, and one for if you have a round chambered. And then all I've essentially done is tied those to the any state starting point using the different parameters here. So draw, fire, hide, reload, and then a switch, a bool for empty. So if we look at the different reload ones here, we've got reload empty as false, reload empty as true. So you can just add your conditions parameters here. I'm not going to go into this in any more depth than that. There will be a separate tutorial video for setting up animators with NeoFPS's firearm system. But Unity's Mechanim and Animator controllers are a very powerful system, so there's a lot that you can do there. Currently, NeoFPS's firearm system are quite simple in the way they interface with this. They just set parameters on the Animator controller, and then it's up to you how you tie that into your animation. I will be looking at different ways to do this in the future, but for a little while, that's the way it's going to be. So, let's have a quick look at the muzzle effects. So I imported that asset and moved it within here as well. So if we open this up and we find the Shoot FX folder, Prefabs Assault Rifle, we have the muzzle flash emitter, which has a number of things on children, and the shell emitter. So same as. What I'm going to do with those is I'm going to duplicate them. I'm going to move them down into a separate folder, because we need to make some tweaks to these ones. So first up, I'll open the muzzle flash. And there's two particle system based muzzle effect modules for NeoFPS. One of them is a very simple one, which uses one particle system, which it just triggers to emit whenever you fire a shot. The other one is a more complicated one that allows you to have multiple particle systems and does a bit of reparenting on start so that the particles persist between switching weapons and things like that. In this instance, we're just going to use the simple particle system, but there will be a separate tutorial video going through each of the different muzzle effect modules, so you should get a good idea of how they work then. So, the restriction for the simple particle system is that it requires one particle system object. So I'm going to drag this out to create a new prefab from it. And similarly, I'm going to do the same for the shell emitter. For Knife's asset, they have a script that controls the different particle systems attached to it. So we're basically cutting that out of the equation. So we just have the base objects there. So let's delete those originals. And let's open these ones up. So we're going to need to make some tweaks just to the setup of the particle system. So first things first, we want to make sure we're not looping, and we're not. We want to make sure that we're not play on awake, and we are not. We want to go into the emission and make sure that we've got a burst set up. So what this means is that when in code you call emit on the particle system, that is the burst that happens. We want to make sure that we don't have any rate over time, and that's currently true. So since Knife's muzzle effects are made up of multiple particle systems, the way to get that working with Neo is to set up the child particle systems as sub-emitters. So we want to open up this sub-emitters section here, tick that on, and then we can add each of these as children. So that's the smoke one. The next one is a light particle. Is that a particle system? Yeah, it is. So for that, again, another sub-emitter, just add to that, and we just drag this in. And that should be enough. Let's just quickly check that those aren't set to play on awake or looping. No, they're not. We're good. And emission is fine. So let's check out the shells prefab. This is just a single particle system, so essentially all we need to do is check that it's not looping, not play on awake, and we're good to go. Excellent. So here we are back in the NeoFPS Hub, and I have the Modular Firearm wizard selected. So we are going to create a new weapon from scratch using those assets. Okay, so the first options are pretty self-explanatory. This is the prefab name that we want to use, so I'm just going to call that SCAR-L. Auto prefix just adds a kind of standardized prefix name to the prefab, and overwrite existing, self-explanatory. So the next thing is the view model of the weapon. Now this is the prefab that we tidied up earlier. So this is the SCAR-L prefab. Now trying to drag that in, it didn't do anything. And the reason for that is that this originally here is just set to allow model prefabs. So if you bring in an FBX or something like that, that's a model prefab. This SCAR-L here is just an outright prefab. It has been created from a model, had various things added to it and various settings changed and things like that. So we need to switch on allow non-model prefabs here to drag that in. So if we do that, then we get the view model set up here. And this exposes a load of new options for us. So let's go through these one by one. So first up, weapon object. This is a weapon within the hierarchy of the view model that represents the gun itself. So if we click on this picker, this gives us the hierarchy browser. A number of the object fields within NeoFPS, whether it be in the wizards or whether it be within the different components and scripts, use these custom browsers that are a bit more powerful, a bit more flexible than the standard Unity browsers. So this one, for example, opens up the contents of the prefab itself, and we can find within here the object representing the gun, which in this case was called gun controller. Animation controller, we just want to drag in the controller that we just looked at. Uses animation events is false. Now, camera. This is an interesting one. So some assets, some art assets will have animated cameras. Some of them will also have different pivot points using humanoid rigs, things like that. In NeoFPS, weapons are aligned so that the camera is essentially the origin. Now, some art assets might do things a bit differently. They might have an arbitrary origin point, or they might use a humanoid rig, so the origin is down at the feet of the character. So in that situation, there's a setting here that lets you pick a game object from within the view models hierarchy that represents the camera. So if we do that, and we open up the hierarchy browser again, then we can find an object in here called FP camera. And then this also gives us a new option, which is the camera animated. So in certain cases, like for example, David Stemfer's low poly FPS, the camera animations add quite a bit to things like the reloads. In this asset, I'm actually not sure, so I'm just going to switch it on anyway. No harm done. So inventory next. Now here, for the inventory type, we need to match the inventory of the character in the demo scene that we've got. So in this instance, we're using the swappable inventory, but you've got a few different options available to you. Quick switch is your Doom style inventory with keys 1 to 0, having different weapons attached to them. You set these based on the key that you want to use here. However, this is array based, so it does start at 0. 0 represents the 1 key, 1 represents the 2 key, and so on and so forth. Swappable, instead of using a quick slot index, uses a category for the weapon, which allows you to hold X number of each different type of category. Stacked here is similar to a quick switch, however, it actually allows multiple weapons on each of the different numbers. So this is a bit like Half-Life 2, where you have multiple pistols on one stack, rifles on one stack, explosives on one stack. So here you set an inventory stack index, which is the quick slot again, starting at 0, and then the priority within it. So this is the order in the list for that stack that the weapon will appear. However, since we're using a swappable inventory, let's select that. Ooh, actually custom, that just means you're using your own inventory system, so completely miss the inventory component off the firearm. Anyway, swappable. So here we've assigned the firearm category, which is what we want. Item key, this is a unique ID for the weapon. Now I'm going to be doing a separate tutorial video covering the inventory system and how that applies to firearms and things like that. So in this situation, click on this button, opens up the inventory database browser, and I'm just going to pick firearm assault rifle for the key. Now this does mean, currently, that if you're holding any other weapon that has that key, you won't be able to pick up this one. That is something to bear in mind. You want to be adding unique ones, but it's just outside of the topic of this tutorial. So, next up, sprinting. So there's a few options here. There's no sprinting animation if you just want your old classic retro-style shooters. Procedural sprinting. This uses the firearm stance system to actually add a procedural spring and bounce as you're running. And keyframe sprinting. So this uses the animations within the animator controller of the weapon itself. In this case, I'm going to add procedural sprinting. And I'm going to leave it at the default settings. Aiming fatigue ties into an optional stamina system for the characters. This means that as you're aiming down sights, it will slowly tire you out. I'm going to leave this off for this tutorial. Same with overheat. I'm going to leave that off. So this is a system that allows the weapon to heat up as you fire it and then can cause blockages or visual effects. Now that we've done everything on this page, we can hit the next button and it will take us along to the next thing, which is the shooter module. So multiple choice lets you choose between hit scan or projectile based. So this is using a raycast for instant hits or spawning a projectile with a velocity for slower. I'm going to pick a projectile. and then the shot groupings. With each individual shot, how many bullets do you get? So do you get a single bullet? Do you get a random spread of bullets like a shotgun? Or do you get a fixed pattern of bullets like, for example, the EVA 8 shotgun from Apex Legends? So in this case, I'm going to go with single shot because we're modeling a real-world rifle. So muzzle tip. This is an object within the hierarchy of the view model that is used to represent where exactly the bullet comes from. So some assets will have an object to do this. This one I don't think does, so I'm going to leave this blank, and one will be created for us, and we can just tweak the position of it when we're done. Accuracy spread. So this is as your accuracy reduces because you're moving, because you're shooting a lot, accuracy goes down over time in that situation. So this is the minimum spread, so when you're fully accurate, and the maximum spread, so when you're at 0 accuracy. Projectile prefab, we need to pick projectile to actually fire, so I'm going to go for the 5.56mm. And then we have things like muzzle speed and gravity. So more realistic for a rifle like this would be something like 750 meters a second. Gravity we'll leave as is. And that's everything for the shooter. Next up, trigger. So various options here. Semi-automatic for modeling pistols, sniper rifles, things like that. Automatic for things like machine guns. Burst for things like carbines. Charged is for holding down the trigger to charge up a shot, and then when it hits full charge it fires. Releasing will release the charge. Queued allows you to hold the trigger, which queues up multiple shots, and then when you release the trigger it fires off as many as you have queued up. And then guided projectile ones, so target lock and multi-target lock triggers. I'm going to have a separate video specifically for these, and also a video for the main trigger types. So let's, in this situation, pick automatic. Shot spacing of 5 gives a rate of fire of 10 rounds per second, 600 rounds per minute. Shot spacing is in fixed update frames. This means that it's consistent across different computers. Also very useful for things like multiplayer, where you want everybody to have the same predictable weapon behavior. So we go, that's that sorted. Hit next, and we are on to the ammo hit effect. So the ammo hit effect is what actually happens when you shoot an object. In the simplest case, we have the bullet effect. This applies a force and damage to the object, and uses the surface system to spawn a particle effect. There is advanced bullet effect. This has like randomized damage values and fall off based on the range of the shot for hit scan, or the speed of the shot for projectile based. Let's just go simple, keep it bullet effect. You also have explosive and particle effect for more kind of special weapons. Damage, we can whack that up some. Default is fine, impact force is fine, bullet size is absolutely fine on defaults. Behavior on impact. So this is some of the extra features that you can add. So for example, we have ricochet, and we have penetration, and then we have a more complex kind of surface-based system that specifies ricochet and penetration settings per surface in like a data asset that you can attach to this weapon. In this case, we're just going to keep it simple. When a bullet hits, the bullet stops and does the damage and all of that. There we go, that's the fire effect, the ammo effect. Recoil. So there's a lot that you can do here. However, just to keep it simple, I'm just going to grab a preset here, which is the heavy full auto, and just leave it at that. Spring recoil, all good. Just leave it at defaults. You can tweak those once we're done. So that's probably the best way to do it, to be honest. You can tweak them at runtime as well. Muzzle effects. So if you remember, we set up knife's muzzle effects and impact effects prefabs here. So what I'm going to do is use the particle system muzzle effect, and we're going to go for a prefab, and we're going to drag in the, let me just get access to it. I'm going to drag in that muzzle flash prefab that we created earlier. The other thing with the muzzle effects is the audio side of things. So I am going to add here assault rifle gunshot, and then add a few more copies of that, and just switch them to variants. It just means it picks those randomly with every shot. Next up, ammo type. So this is the pool of ammo that that the weapon actually takes its ammo from as you're reloading and things like that. So we have inventory based, we have custom attached to the weapon, we have infinite ammo, and we have recharging ammo ammo pool. I'm going to go with inventory based for this situation, and then we need to pick an ammo type, which is just a simple data file. So 556. There we go. The reloader is the behavior when reloading. So when you take out a magazine, put a new one in, things like that. We have options for very simple, exactly that. Take out the mag, put it in, you've got more ammo. Chambered, which is separate animations for if you have rounds still left in the weapon. If you remember, the Animator controller for this weapon actually does have that. You also have incremental for things like shotguns, if you want to keep putting individual rounds in as you reload, and then pass through, which just means that instead of reloading the weapon, it takes its ammo directly from the pool. So we're going to go for chambered here, which exposes a number of options again. Audio, the asset doesn't actually come with audio files. I'm just going to pick some a reload one here. It probably won't match up that well, but it's the best we've got for this situation. Countdown last rounds. This is a cool little feature similar to Apex Legends, things like that, where as you're reaching the end of your magazine, it will start to introduce another sound just to telegraph that to you. I'm going to leave that switched off, but as we look at the other templates within the wizard, you'll see one of the options there, so we can check it out. Okay, that's all of the ammo and reload. On to the next. Shell eject. Now again, if you remember, we grabbed a particle system from knife for that one. So we're going to have particle system here. We're going to drag that one in. Delay for 0 means that as soon as we fire, it spawns a shell. So that's nice and easy. Next up is aiming. So aiming down sights. So this one, there's various options. Scoped options, options to move the weapon to align it to the sight, options to trigger an animation, to move the camera to align it to the weapon, or just can only use hipfire. So I'm going to choose the weapon move aimer. This moves the weapon to align it to the camera, so you're looking down the sight, and it does that using this aim position option here. So ideally, you would have an object within the hierarchy of the gun, which is aligned with the sights. We don't have that in this one, and I didn't set one up to start off with. So in this situation, I'm just going to say do not move. It will also allow us to specify an animation later on, so we'll just check if there's an animation option available then. FOV multiplier, so this is the field of view of the camera when you're aiming down sights. So a 2x zoom is a FOV multiplier of 0.5. So 0.75 should be absolutely fine because we're just using iron sights. You want a bit of kind of a focus effect, but that's about it. And then the aim time, that's just how quickly you zoom in. Block the trigger. That means, will you be able to fire whilst you're transitioning between aiming and hipfire? I'm going to switch that off just because it's more responsive about it. And then things like position spring and rotation spring multipliers. So this means that the recoil or things like walking animations, position bob of the camera, things like that, are reduced as you're aiming down sights. So I'm going to leave those at default. You can tweak them once we're done, if anything feels a bit much. And lastly, we have the crosshairs. So we have default crosshair for hip firing and no crosshair for when we're aiming down sights. That's all fine. So if we hit next, we have animations. So down at the bottom here, you can see this is a list of all the parameters that are on the Animator controller that we had earlier. So in this case, we do not have a trigger hold parameter. So it's showing a little error here. So if I just delete that, that error will go away. There's also no trigger or ball for aiming, so we don't want that. Essentially, reload trigger, chamber empty, defaults worked fine, so reload matches there, empty matches there, and we're all good with the animations. So if I hit complete now, we come to the final stage. This is just an overview of all the settings that we've got. And from here, we can either save this as a template, so that will mean that when you first open the wizard again, it will show that in the list, in the drop-down list of templates. It means that you can set up say, a template for your project for certain types of weapons, and then you can use that as a starting point from then on. Or we can hit create item and actually create it here. So NeoFPS tutorial, SCAR-L, yeah, that's the one, set that folder, and boom, we have a firearm. So if I open this up, close the Animator controller, here is our firearm prefab. You can see on the root of this, we have the modular firearm component, we have all of the different modules that we chose based on those questions. We have a firearm transform match setter for doing the camera animation, and it set up anchors for us as we go. And yeah, everything else that we need. So procedural sprint animation handler, NeoSerialized game object for save games, the inventory system, the input, jobs are good. Now before we actually test this out, I am going to just quickly go in here and gun controller. If you remember, this is the object that we selected to represent the gun. And it has created an object under here called components. And inside this, it has added a number of objects for us. So we have the muzzle tip. I'm going to move that to align with the muzzle tip. Whoop, that is miles off. Not too bad, that'll do. Muzzle flash. Same thing. I'm going to move that to roughly the same place. That one was a bit better aligned. And shells. So this one, let's just reset the transform on this. We'll position this so it's roughly in the shell ejecting port. We want this one to be, well, actually we want all of them to be Z forwards, I think. So let's just rotate that 90 degrees. And in this case, the shell ejector, Y is the direction is that it will fire the shells out of. So that should work just fine. Let's just quickly check these ones again. It's the muzzle flash, that one actually was good. Muzzle tip was Z forwards, so that's all good. That should be everything that we need. So, I can't just hit play, unfortunately. It's not that easy. We need to go in here, find the character that we're actually using. So that's this one. And there's a couple of ways that we can do this, but let's just add this gun to our starting items. If you find the inventory component on the character, then there's a section called starting items here. We can just drag this new firearm SCAR-L in there. And if we hit play, we should be good. Except there's one thing that I realized I completely forgot to do. I didn't set the magazine size for the reloader. Okay, let's go back, open up the firearm again. Where are we? We are in chambered reloader. We need a magazine size of 30. Ooh, not 309. It's pretty big. And a starting magazine of 30. Whoops. We'll just check that one when we look at the other templates as well. So here we go. So aiming, if you remember, we didn't have a thing aligned to, so all it's essentially doing is zooming in. We can fix that in a second. Yeah, there we go. And we can pick up more ammo from the ammo crate here. And jobs are good. So if I come back out, have a look here, then one way that's quite easy to align the sights here, or makes things a little bit easier, is if we create, let's just duplicate this for now, call it aim, and add a camera to it. This camera is purely temporary. We want to align it here and we want to rotate it so it's facing forwards. Set the clipping planes to 0 so it doesn't clip out the weapon. And essentially what we want to do here is just align this so it's looking through the sights of the gun. You can see down bottom right, it's the camera itself. Let me just tweak that a tiny bit. There we go. We want that up a tiny bit as well. Tell a lie, we want it down a tiny bit. There we go. and then we want to move it back, just so it's... so that's essentially the view that you'll get from the camera in-game. So if we remove the camera component from this again, now we have that object. So if we open up... shouldn't have closed it. If we open up the prefab again, and we find, where is it? Weapon move aimer, that's the one. Then on here, the same options that we had in the wizard, the aim offset. So we can just drag in this object here. And what that means is that when we hit aim in game, it will move the camera to align it to that object. There you go. We have the knife muzzle effect flaring away as we're firing. So yeah, essentially that's the process of using the firearm wizard to create a gun nice and easy. The alternative way, as we covered in the first video, is you can actually use the modular firearm component itself. It gives you all of these controls to add different components. But a lot of people like to have everything in one place, and the wizard just kind of leads you through things a little bit easier. So let's quit out of this, and let's actually have a look at some of the different templates that we've got. Advanced Assault Rifle. So if we look at the description here, set up for quick switch inventory, so we'll change that. It has a procedural sprinting system set up, along with aim fatigue. It uses overheat mechanics, including glow and heat haze. The shooter is projectile based, and its projectiles are set to penetrate thin surfaces, with damage falling off based on speed. The muzzle flash uses a realistic particle system. Okay, so let's select that one and start from template. Now you'll see that all of the settings are essentially set to start off with. We want to change the inventory type to swappable. Otherwise, we are all good essentially. And then, yeah, let's just go through and check what's different between the last one. So, aim fatigue was one that we left switch off last time around. Essentially, the stamina system is a 0 to 100, almost like health. Stamina loss here is the amount that's eaten per second when you're aiming down sights. Stamina target is how far down in the 0 to 100 it will actually work to. And then the fall off is how far away from that point the effect starts to drop away. So in this situation, for example, stamina target and fall off of 25 each means that once you get halfway down the stamina, it will start to slow down how quickly it loses it. It means that you don't get completely exhausted just by holding a rifle, but you do get tired. So it's used for various different effects, like slowing down your movement or increasing the sway of the weapon. Next up, for the overheat, we have various settings here. So we have the glow renderer. So this is the mesh in the view model that needs to change. We have the glow material. So this uses one of NeoFPS's glow metallic or glow specular shaders. Glow threshold. So as the weapon heats up, at what point does it start to glow? Haze prefab. This is a heat haze kind of distortion effect. So we place that above the gun barrel. Haze threshold. So at what point, as you're heating up, does it start to show the haze? And then we have various things for like how much heat is added per shot and how much is lost per second. So as long as you're adding more per shot than you're losing per second, then the gun will start to heat up. Damping is just means that you don't get the heat just suddenly popping straight up and then fading straight down linearly. It gives you a nice bit of smoothing to that effect. Do overheat. So this means that once you hit 100% heat, the weapon will just jam. It will stop working until it's been allowed to cool down below this cooling threshold here. And you can optionally add a sound, a little heat hiss or something once you hit that point. So yeah, next up, what we got? Projectile based, single shot, just like last time. Everything else is pretty similar there. Automatic, just the same as last time. So advanced bullet effect. So this gives us randomization of the damage between a minimum and a maximum, and a fall off mode. So effective speed is 100% damage, minimum speed is 0% damage. impact force, bullet size, they're the same as we had before. Behavior on impact, we've added a simple penetration. So this is saying you can penetrate 0.15 meters. In doing so, it will scatter up to 15 degrees from its original path. I think that means 7.5 either side of it actually, so it's a cone of 15 degrees. The projectile that's going to be spawned once you've penetrated, so essentially that's going to be the same as the normal one, as the gun projectile itself usually. And then a follow-up effect. So this is the effect of the bullet hitting an object behind the thing it's penetrated. So for example, you could have another penetration effect. You can stack them. You can't use the same one again and again because that will be recursive and bad, but you can have multiple if you wanted to. In this case, we use an advanced bullet effect because what that means is that as you penetrate a surface with the bullets, it actually slows the bullets down. If you hit something that's like 0.0001, like a really tiny thin surface, you won't really get any slowdown. But if you hit something that's 0.149, for example, then you'll still penetrate, but your bullet will be going very, very slow when it comes out the other side. So you're not going to do as much damage to something on the other side of that surface. So, next up, what else we got? Recoil, all good, mainly defaults. Advanced particle system. So this is using one of the pre-made particle systems from NeoFPS. These are aligned specifically to the demo weapons, but you can set your own up by copying one of these and just moving the objects around on your weapon. Ammo is simple stuff, inventory based, simple reload. We do have a countdown last rounds, so what it's doing here is it's saying for the last 5 shots in your magazine, we play the dry fire sound with this volume. So at the very last shot, we play at full volume. Next to last shot, this volume. So what that means is that the dry fire sound will fade in as you're firing your last shots of the magazine. Shell casing is bog standard. Pooled object spawner, so this just spawns a shell casing object, which is this prefab here. Oh no, this prefab here, that's the object that it spawns from. Weapon move aimer, as before. This time around we have an aim object already in the hierarchy, so we say use a child object, and we've highlighted that. And then we have the animations. So if we create this, and let's just put it in the same folder. Boom. Then we now have Firearm Advanced Assault Rifle. So I'm going to grab our character and swap the Scar L for this one, and we can take a look. Oh, good times. So, muzzle effects. My demo weapons have these muzzle effect objects already built in. So essentially, let's just go back to here and disable these objects. Where are you hiding? You can go, that one can go. Now if we hit play, there we go. So you can see penetration here. This weapon model is missing the reticule from the holographic sight, so you would need to add that back in later. But otherwise, we essentially have the gun set up as we wanted. If you check out the heat slider in the bottom right, you can see that building up as we shoot. Let's grab some more ammo. And you can also hear the gunshots kicking down as we get to the end. So, just to help with the heat side of things, let's just go back to this. Where's the reloader? There is simple reloader. I'm going to whack this up to 150. 150. So all of the different things that we change there are actually components on the object. So for example, the overheat will be in here somewhere. Where are you? Firearm overheat, that's the one. So with this one we can also whack up the heat per shot. And I can just show you that quickly. There's the heat glowing up. And you can see the muzzle tip is glowing. A bit hard to see the effect of the heat haze. If we just zoom in there, you should see it rippling slightly. Yeah, and there we go. Quickly have a look at the other one as well. Oh no, Wizards, Modular Firearm. We want the anti-material rifle. So, this is a sniper weapon. It's intended to destroy heavy targets. So it uses a projectile that can penetrate surfaces up to 0.4 meters, delivers an explosive payload after that. Realistic particle system, ammo pool attached to the weapon instead of taking ammo from the wielder's inventory. So if we not hit create from scratch, hit start from template. There we go. Swappable inventory again. We've got the procedural sprinting, we've got aim fatigue, no overheat. Single shot, projectile based, this is all the same as before. Semi-auto, so it's a one-time thing. Cooldown is how frequently you can press the trigger. And repeat delay is how frequently it will do it if you just hold the trigger down. Advanced bullet effect, so drop off for the initial hit, penetration, and then the follow-up effect is explosive. So here we've grabbed a pooled explosion prefab and given it damage and force. Recoil, bog standard. Particle system, same as the last one. Custom ammo instead of inventory ammo. So we've given it a name, we've just said this is how much you have to start off with, this is your maximum. So we won't be able to pick up more ammunition from the crate. This is attached to the gun, so you would have to pick up a new gun if you wanted to carry on using. Reloaded type is simple, bog standard stuff. Pooled object spawner for the shell eject. Scoped aimer, so this is using a HUD-based scope, UI-based scope. So when you click, it will raise the weapon, then it will switch over to this UI-based one. Aim position is where it will raise the weapon to before it switches, same as with the assault rifle that we just had. And the HUD scope key allows you to have multiple different scopes for different weapons. Everything else is pretty similar. Animations are same as before, nice and simple. So if we just hit complete, create the item, and choose that same folder again. And there we go. Let's just open this up and check the muzzle flash. So we want to disable that. And now, if we go grab our character, scroll down to the bottom, starting items, and just swap over to the anti-material rifle. We should be able to see it in the scene. There we go. Zoom in, this is the HUD-based scope. Just shot straight through there. But if we shoot through here, you see that it exploded behind the glass. So it's penetrated the first layer and then used the second bullet effect once it hit behind. That's that. Essentially, as I add new modules to the Firearm Wizard, I will add different options within there. However, you should be aware that you can't model the more complex behaviors through there. Essentially, what it does is lets you choose the modules that are going to be placed on the root of the weapon, but things like mode switching, so using multiple different modules of each type and then switching between them at runtime, that just requires a bit more setup. And it's impossible for me to predict exactly what you need to do. So if you're going to be modeling weapons with, say, different fire rates, multiple scopes, things like that, then you can use the wizard as a starting point. But the other option is to use the modular firearm component itself, and then you can add multiple from here as you go. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope that was useful. As usual, get in touch on the Discord if you have any comments, any questions, things like that. And yeah, cheers.